In the depths of a thick Brazilian forest stood an old house made of stone and clay, abandoned for decades. No one in the nearby village dared to approach it, for eerie tales surrounded the place. Stories of vengeful spirits, cries heard at midnight, and flames that suddenly erupted in the basement without explanation. Long before it was a place of whispered legends. The house stood witness to a brutal chapter of the Brazilian Civil War, a conflict that had torn the countryside apart. In the midst of this chaos, a small community of native families, desperate to escape the advancing violence, sought sanctuary within its stone walls. They believed its remote location offered a chance at survival. For days they huddled in the damp, cold basement, their world reduced to whispers and shadows, a fragile peace in the heart of a storm. But they were never spared. One moonless night, the thundering of hooves broke the forest's silence. A detachment of soldiers, their hearts hardened by war, had tracked them to their final hiding place. There was no mercy. The soldiers barred the heavy basement door, sealing the family's fate. The acrid smell of kerosene filled the air, followed by the terrifying whoosh of ignition. Flames erupted, greedily consuming the old wood. The women screamed, the children cried until their voices were swallowed by fire, and the men struggled helplessly against the unyielding stone. The fire raged until dawn, leaving a charred skeleton of a home. The tragedy was so profound, so violent, that it seeped into the very foundation. The house didn't just burn, it absorbed the final, desperate moments of every soul trapped within, becoming a permanent prison for the restless spirits who could never leave, forever reliving their final horrifying night. Years passed until a man named Marcus came from a distant city to buy the house at a very low price. People warned him, saying no one ever lasted a night inside. But Marcus didn't believe in folklore. He longed for solitude and peace, and he thought the house was perfect for a new beginning. On his first night, an oppressive silence fell over the manor, but the house would not stay quiet. It began with a slow, heavy tread from the floor above, dragging footsteps, pacing directly over his head. He was supposed to be the only living soul for miles. Then, a new sound joined the first, far more disturbing. A low moan that vibrated up through the floorboards, twisting into muffled screams of pure agony. It was a multitude of voices crying out from the very earth beneath the house. He tried to dismiss it as his mind, playing tricks, but an unshakable feeling of being watched kept him awake. Then, the grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight. As if summoned, a thick, oily black smoke began to seep from beneath the basement door. It crawled along the floor, twisting in unnatural patterns, carrying the smell of acrid ash and old blood. His heart pounding, Marcus approached the door. As his hand touched the cold iron handle, a furnace-like blast of heat radiated from within. The sight that met his eyes was a tableau from hell. The basement was a canvas of suffering. Shadows writhed on the stone walls, spectral afterimages of a horrific tragedy. He saw the translucent figures of children with hollow, weeping eyes, women frozen in eternal screams, and charred, skeletal men lifting pleading hands toward him. their silent agony a physical weight in the air.
Paralyzed, he watched as one figure detached itself from the wall of despair. A small boy. The flesh on one side of his face melted away to reveal bone. The air grew deathly cold as he stepped forward, his empty eyes locking onto Marcus. A voice like rustling, burning leaves whispered, "This is our tomb. Leave, before we make it yours."
A primal scream tore from Marcus's throat as he slammed the heavy door shut. The bolt slid home, but it offered no comfort. The haunting was no longer contained. The boy's whisper was replaced by a cacophony erupting through the house. Dragging chains echoed from above. A guttural chant rose from the walls. Then, down the long, dark hallway, doors began to slam shut, one after another, shaking the manor to its foundations. His oil lamp wouldn't light. Panic set in. Grabbing a single candle, he fled toward his bedroom. The hallway became a gauntlet of fear, the flickering flame casting his shadow into a monstrous giant, while other, darker shadows writhed at the edge of the light, whispering his name. He reached his bedroom, his last bastion of hope, but it was instantly annihilated. The room was not empty. It was filled with the same black, smoky shapes from the basement swirling around his bed. As he stood frozen, the shapes advanced, the air growing thick with the overpowering stench of burning hair and flesh.
One form solidified into the face of a woman, her features grotesquely marred, half her face melted flesh. Molten tears dripped from her sorrowful eyes. Her voice was a hoarse, broken rasp. "This ground is salted with our ashes. This wood is stained with our pain. Why have you come to a house of our blood?"
A supernatural wind tore through the room, slamming the door and extinguishing his candle, plunging him into darkness with the specters. In that suffocating blackness, surrounded by whispers, Marcus finally understood. He hadn't purchased a home. He had trespassed into an open grave, a monument of agony where the tortured spirits of the Blackwood family had no intention of letting him leave. Panic seized him. The shadowy forms in the foyer were no longer ethereal. They coalesced, taking on the horrifying shapes of their final moments. Cold, spectral hands clawed at his clothes, their touch burning like ice. A chorus of whispers swirled around him, not just of pain, but of a chilling, possessive hunger. He snatched his bag, survival overriding terror, and fought through the grasping apparitions, shoving through the heavy front door. The instant he stumbled across the threshold, a deafening silence fell. The oppressive cold vanished and silence fell. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by the damp chill of the forest. The air in his lungs no longer felt stolen. But this was no gentle quiet. It was an expectant, predatory silence. He burst into the woods, his small candle flame sputtering violently before an unseen breath extinguished it, plunging him into darkness. Gasping for air, his heart hammering his ribs, he dared to look back. He dared to look back. The house stood silhouetted against the moon, a tomb of rotten wood. Then, one by one, with violent echoing bangs, every window slammed shut. Not just closed, but sealed with supernatural force. It wasn't casting him out. It was locking itself down, jealously guarding the horrors within. A predator retreating to its lair. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsing on the outskirts of the nearest village. Raving and disheveled, his terror was genuine as he warned the villagers, his voice raw. He spoke of a house that was a grave, a place that fed on life and sanity. He pleaded that anyone foolish enough to seek shelter there would be consumed to their soul, just another echo in its haunted halls. Marcus never returned, and few believed his frantic tale. But the house remains, a monument to a forgotten tragedy, a family torn apart by a cursed inheritance, a father driven to madness. Every night it replays its final, bloody moments, a symphony of horror echoing through the trees. They say if you listen closely at the stroke of midnight, you can still hear them. Not just echoes of the past, but a fresh invitation, a promise of room for one more.